Thank you. Shalom. Let's just bow our heads and let's pray before we go into the message. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my salvation. And may your Spirit speak to us, either through me or in spite of me. But let us hear the whisperings of your Spirit in our minds and in our hearts. Amen. The title of today's sermon is When God Says Stop. I grew up in a town in South Africa called Pietersburg. They changed the name of the town since it's called Polokwane. And it's in the northern part of the country, the far north of the country. I spent most of my childhood there, and one of the fondest memories that I have of this town is the memory of church bells. We lived in an area with lots of churches. The church that you see in the picture here was right in front of our house. It was a Roman Catholic church. And they had, I think, far more than 2 bells. So on any given Sunday morning, you were awakened with church bells. So with this one right in front of us, and about 200 meters to the right, there was the Hervormde Kerk. It was an Afrikaans Reformed church. On the other side, it was a Dutch Reform. And then about 100 to 200 meters from them, it was the Methodists. On the other side, it was the Baptist. And then it was the Full Gospels. And then on the other side, we had the Lutherans and another Reformed congregation. And we even had the synagogue. And that's only a few of them. So we were surrounded by churches. So in those days, we did not have social media, Kakao Talk, Facebook, or anything of those sort. We had church bells. And the church bells reminded you it's time to get up. So in the morning, 6 o'clock, the Catholic Church had their first Mass with bells. And then 9 o'clock, the Reformed Church had their service with bells. And then the Baptists had their service with bells. The Dutch Reformed, well, they tried to do better, and they also had bells a half an hour before the church, a quarter before the church, and then when the church started, they had bells. So on a Sunday morning, nobody stayed home. Everybody went to church just to get them stop ringing. So it was a time of bells and smells. It was a wonderful time in our town. After church, everybody went to church in the morning, and after church, it was time for lunch. In those days, we did not have the many restaurants of today. You go home, and what is a Sunday lunch without chicken and pudding? So we had our chicken and pudding on a Sunday afternoon. It was wonderful. And after that, it was time for the whole town to take a nap. And for kids, it was the most boring time because swimming was sin. Any sport was sin. You sat at home and you pray that the afternoon will go fast. That was Sundays. There was only one shop open, and it was the cafe. The Greeks usually had cafes. They go to church at the Catholic Church very early, so they could keep their cafes open. That was my town. It was an interesting time. One thing that I learned from that time was Sundays were special days. They were holy. They were different than any other day. And that reminds me of the 4th commandment. In the morning services, we are talking about the 10 commandments. And we try to interpret the 10 commandments in today's language and how it applies to our lives today. The fourth commandment was our topic for this morning, and so I thought it's also good to speak about that this afternoon. A few observations about the fourth commandment. The first observation is that the fourth commandment takes up the most space of all the other commandments. If you look at the commandment, it appears 2 times. First in Exodus 20 and the second in Deuteronomy 5 that we read this afternoon. In both places, this commandment is the longest and most detailed of all the commandments. The shortest commandments are, thou shalt not steal, or thou shalt not murder. In fact, in the Hebrew, it's only 2 words for each of them. But this commandment takes up 136 words in some translations. In the Hebrew, it's also the longest commandment. For us, it might not be very important, but for the Jew, this was of great significance. The second observation I would like to make is that this commandment forms the bridge between the 2 parts of the Decalogue, of the 10 Commandments. The first part of the 10 Commandments is about our relationship with God. The second part talks about the relationship we have with our fellow members, with our fellow human beings. But this commandment makes a bridge between the 2 because it touches on our relationship with God, but also our relationship towards our fellow humans. Further on, this is very interesting that this commandment has to do not only with our relationship to God, our relationship to our fellow human beings, but it also has to do with our relationship to creation, to animals, to the creation all around us, nature. So this forms the bridge. The third observation I would like to make is that principles in this commandment became a lot of regulations. It became legalism. Just to give you an example, for the Jews, this was a topic of much discussion. So what they did was they asked the question, so what is work? And from work, they asked the question, what is a burden? Eventually, they had 39 different classifications called fathers of work. And they went on, and the one regulation becomes a second one, and so it went on. I think in the time of Jesus, they had about nearly 2,000 regulations that just regulate what is work. So you can imagine. Interesting, one of them was, what is a burden? So if work is to carry a burden, what is a burden? So they said, well, can a father lift his child? And some of the scholars say, yes, but not if the child has a pebble in his hand. So they asked the question, what is a pebble? And so they had to define the pebble. Another one was, it was forbidden to tie a knot, light a fire, move a lamp, go on a journey, or prepare a meal, or to heal on the Sabbath. So they had a problem, because if they prepared the meal the day before, on the day of the Sabbath, they still had to lift the meal up, carry the meal, and that might also be a burden. So they got entangled in all these burdens. Another thing was that in case of illness or injury, steps could be taken for a man to keep a man from getting worse, but not to heal him. So there were all these interesting regulations, and the day of the Sabbath became a day of burdens, a day of do's and don'ts. There was another one that if on a Sabbath day your house caught fire, you could not carry your clothes out of the house. That was forbidden, because that would be work. So they had all kinds of regulations and things. And in the time of Jesus, well, he broke most of them. And of course, it sent the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious leaders of that time into a frenzy, because Jesus simply broke most of those rules. He ate with his disciples on a Sabbath. He healed on the Sabbath, and he did all kinds of things on the Sabbath. The fourth one is that this commandment is controversial. Throughout the centuries, this was a commandment of much controversy. One part of the community says, well, we should take the Saturday as a Sabbath, and we should have it like the Jews in the old times. The other part that we are part of, we said, no, we worship on a Sunday. So there's a lot of controversy about that. And we can talk in length about that, but it would take up too much time. I would like to come to the heart of this commandment. The heart of this commandment, God's intention with this commandment, is actually very simple. And I want to talk about that for a while. The principle of the commandment is actually just this. In Matthew 2, or Mark 2, verse 23 to 28, Jesus says, well, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for Sabbath. It was God's intention that something would happen on the Sabbath. It was a principle. And that principle is very clear just in the word, Sabbath. The word means to stop. To stop. What God wanted to tell his people was stop. Stop for a while. He called that day holy. It was a day to stop whatever they were doing and just take a rest. And he built this into the whole of creation. He built this into you and to me as people. We need a day, we need a time in our lives to stop. The problem that we experience these days, and I mean, you experience it all the time, and I experience it, is that we live in an age of perpetual busyness. We always busy. We live in a bali culture. We have to be there the fastest, the quickest. We have to do something that we would have done tomorrow. We should have done it yesterday. We are so busy with all that we have on our schedules every single week. We are busy people. The problem of our busyness is that we're busy burning the candle on both sides. Burnout. And burnout is a problem in the Church of God these days. Not only in the Church of God, it's a problem everywhere. People got burned out. The sad fact is that burnout is a silent disease. It's the twin brother of depression, yet not recognized as such. It is sad that in Asia, it is said that 61% of all the suicides in the world occur in Asia. So, maybe you know someone who just had enough. And so in our culture and in our society, burnout is a real problem. What is burnout? Burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. There's a bit of a difference between stress and burnout. You see, stress, by large, involves too much. But burnout is about having had enough. I've had enough. You know, Elijah In the Old Testament, where he said to God, I've had enough. I'm finished. Stress is good for us. We need some kind of stress to keep us alert, keep us going, and function well. But sometimes stress pushes us over the edge. Stress is like chocolate, cheesecake, and anything that's good. I don't know if you like cheesecake, but it's in my case. But too much is poisonous. Too much is not good for you. So here we go, and where burnout is this feeling that I had enough of this. I've no passion anymore. If excessive stress is like drowning in responsibilities, burnout is being all dried up. You may experience burnout if every day is a bad day. You might be on the road of burnout if caring about your work or home or life seems like a total waste of energy. If you're exhausted all the time, if the majority of your day is spent on tasks you find either mind-numbingly dull or overwhelming. If you feel like nothing you do makes a difference or is even appreciated. And that effect of this burnout is spilling out in every area of your life. You cannot enjoy life anymore. Bill Hybels, former pastor of one of America's largest churches, he described it like this. He says, when my crisis hit, I didn't realize my reservoir was depleted until I began to feel vulnerable morally, found myself getting short and testy with people, felt the desire to get out of God's work. Suddenly I knew the tank was dry. We live in a time where we never turn off. We're on our phones and on our computers and our social media and all the things that we are busy with all the time. When you go to your desk in your office, you turn on the computer and immediately there's an overwhelming lot of information coming to you and you are in the cyber world. When you go home, you turn on the computer or the television. When you go into your car and you drive your car, you have the media. And everywhere you go, we just busy. We never turn off. We never get to a place of quietness and silence. And so we suffer from burnout. And then God says, stop. Stop. God says, I created this not to make it into 1,000 regulations and another burden. No, I created the Sabbath because I know you need to stop. And God says, stop. He doesn't mean quit. God says, just stop. For now. And do whatever you need to do to stop. Stop when you don't have anything more to give. It's time to stop. Stop. Take a break from your phone and your computer and social media and Facebook and the Twitter and the news and everything that overwhelms our minds every day, 24/7. Stop. Learn to say no. Stop. When you see life is passing you by and you're drowning, stop when things don't make sense anymore. And God says, stop. Take a break. Rest. Replenish your energy. Maybe God says, stop just long enough to gather wisdom, to get new passion, to get perspective. God's stop sign is there, not to frustrate us, or to get us involved in a theological battle. It's not there to entangle us in 1,000 arguments about how and what to keep and not to do. God's stop sign is simply a stop sign. Stop. If you don't stop, you will crash. God's stop sign is not a simple signboard, but an oasis of rest. It's a resting place on your journey. So let's respect it. Let's observe it. When we break it, we will be broken. That's why God comes to you and to me. And his hand of stop sign is actually an open hand that says, come to me. I'll embrace you. I'll give you new courage. I'll give you new energy. But you cannot get God's energy in the run. You have to stop. Amen.